Serious, what's the scariest or saddest thing you ever dealt with or saw at school? In college, a student went missing for months until he was found by a custodian. Turns out he was alone, drunk, and stumbled into an electrical room. He electrocuted himself to death.
An old school friend found his mother dead due to a heart attack in his bathroom.
From one moment to another he was like a whole different person. He became very emotional, dropped out of school a few years later, began doing drugs, even went to jail. Hope he is doing better today. The final year of my high school. We graduate at 16 here. We were given the option to go on a ski trip somewhere in Italy. One of the teachers seduced and slept with a student on the trip, and naturally being young and dumb,
she fell in love with him and genuinely believed he loved her back.
Then when we got back from the trip, he completely blanked her and broke her heart. She spent hours sobbing in the bathrooms and hallways. Nothing was done about it. Note: age of consent here is 16 too.
So it wasn't illegal from a purely sexual standpoint.
But he took on the role of a guardian on that trip, and the power dynamic made it just as bad. Grew up in a pretty poor district. Got some that people would probably consider worse. Vicious fights, drugs, guns, teacher on student violence and vice versa.
But here's a couple that stick out.
Scariest. High school. Kid assaulted a girl at a party. Following Monday, her BF caught him in the parking lot. He beat and stomped him ruthlessly and actually imprinted a Nike swoosh in the kid's face. I saw the aftermath and that kid was a mess. His lips had somehow split and peeled back, exposing all the teeth on the left side of his face. Facial reconstruction for sure. No idea how he did after that day. Saddest. Junior high. Kid was getting mercilessly picked on because he was wearing the same clothes for like the third or fourth day straight. Super quiet kid, didn't say anything back. We later found out he hadn't changed because his older brother, who was his only caretaker, had killed himself the prior weekend. This 7th grader was the only one left who knew, and he was so emotionally fucked he just silently carried on with school until a neighbor figured out something was wrong. Edit. Jesus, this got more attention than I expected. Some updates. BC questions keep coming. Assaulted kid from the first story transferred, but I don't know anything else. His attacker, who already had a record, was locked up. The girlfriend's assault was sexual but definitely stopped short of what most would call rape. This kid had a track record of being a bit of a creep though. The kid from the second story was gone from school way before we found out what happened.
I was in the class he was in, and I know he was gone shortly after the week he was getting harassed.
I don't know much more about anyone involved.
I just happened to be walking back into the building right as story number 1's fight ended, and only heard about the kid from number 2 through friends.
I didn't witness any bullying, but I had a friend in the class with him when he was being harassed. Kelsey Smith. She was a year ahead of me in high school. I didn't know her very well, but had a couple classes with her and chatted maybe a handful of times. She was one of those people that pretty much everyone knew. Then one morning shortly after the end of the year, my dad told me that some girl from school had gone missing. I did what any teenager in 2007 would have done and jumped on Facebook and found a whole deluge of posts from my friends asking for any information about Kelsey. Then I remember I was in the airport with a bunch of school friends getting ready to go on a class trip to Germany when we saw on the news in the terminal that a body had been found. Scariest was a routine hallway fight that went sideways. It was between two girls.
Out of nowhere, one of them pulls out a box cutter in the middle of the fight and gets a clean
strike right across the other girl's face. The saddest was probably my neighbor. When she was in 5th grade, Early middle school.
She was trying to save up money for something.
I don't remember what. Her parents were huge stoners. Had enormous weed plants growing in their backyard. I could see them clear as day.
One day she brought a gallon-size bag full of weed to school and was planning on selling it to one
of the older kids. The school found out and called the police. I remember coming home and watching them raid their house, taking out plant after plant.
Both the girls ended up in foster care for a long while after that.
A talkative kid,
who I later learned was considered weird,
one day came up to me outside the gym during physical education class.
He and I had never spoken before.
As we waited for the gym doors to open, he pointed to the wall and said, "Imagine if someone was thrown super hard against that surface. They would stick, bleed and then slide down and die." I was taken aback, but was told that he often said this sort of thing that weekend. And sorry to continue with a sad theme.
Yeah.
He hanged himself in his backyard. This was a long time back. I didn't know how to react then and I still don't. Saddest thing. In high school, a girl came to school and got stomach sick during class and literally shit herself and had it come out the back of her pants.
You just don't ever have people not think of that about you for the rest of your life.
She was a nice girl and it was sad because she never had hardly any friends after that and eventually transferred to another school. Saddest, my junior year of high school. One of the students in my math class got shot and killed in a drive-by.
Apparently,
her ex-boyfriend was aiming at her new boyfriend and shot her instead. We didn't do anything in class for a whole week because everyone, even more so our teacher, was just really sad. Scariest, about 10 students from a rival high school close to ours, dressed in our school uniforms and trespassed on our campus during lunch and assaulted a group of our students that they had beef with. The administrators couldn't even stop them as this was more than just some spat or fight. Our students were getting beaten to a pulp. Eventually the cops came and arrested the other students and sent most of ours to the hospital. I remember seeing one of our administrators thrown into the air when he tried to get in between two of the guys. Caretaker killed his wife and kept the body in a van in the school grounds. He hit her over the head with a metal bar. His wife was a lab technician at the school too.
Also
http://news.bbc.co.uk/1/hi/england/berkshire/6113486.stm news article. The two that I remember in high school. Saddest. A kid passed away from a rare heart disease.
He was the school's best runner.
Scariest. At most maybe a week after the Columbine school shootings. These fucking kids set off fireworks in our one hallway. We all thought we were being shot at. Weird-looking kid in high school bullied by some. Death due to cancer announced on intercom. No one had a cow. There was a pair of twins in my high school. One of the twins died from some disease.
Don't remember what.
Few months after that the other twin committed suicide. School shooting. I wasn't in the cafeteria when it happened, but hearing the screams was probably the worst part. When my 12-year-old fellow classmate passed away and they couldn't explain why, so they told us it
was an accidental suicide.
I understood what suicide meant, but the very nature of it meant there was intention behind it. Calling it accidental just confused the grief I was already experiencing.
I'd already lost my grandparents within memory.
I understood death, but having to go to class every day after for the rest of the year.
Where his desk used to be.
Where he used to be. Leaving class afterwards. Late because I was a slow mover. And him not being there anymore were hard. During roll call in high school. when someone wasn't there, and other kids would snicker and say, "Oh, they died," was brutal. Because one day in the middle of the week there was an empty chair, and the boy that sat in it never came back. A lad in the year above me who I went to primary and secondary school with. Not a friend, but I knew him. 1P lesson, he just dropped dead. Undiagnosed heart condition.
He had been a pretty athletic guy as well. I think he did cross-country running.
Teacher here, both the 7th grade. The scariest wasn't really scary but was more of a WTH type of thing. Kid got mad because the teacher wouldn't up his grade from failing to an A or B. Opened up the window. 2nd story, this was one of the few rooms without bars on the window. And, while maniacally laughing, threw books out of it. Kept laughing. Went to walk out of the room and pulled the door shut so hard that the glass in the door shattered. Walked down the hall laughing. The scariest non-WTH thing. Student waited for a teacher and jumped her outside of the building after school one day. She didn't come back. Saddest. One of my brightest and happiest students was dealing with some family issues. Found out in the morning before school that his cousin had stabbed his aunt to death 48 times or something ridiculous like that, and still had to come to school because his parents couldn't miss work and his aunt was basically
his other mom.
I remember him sitting in the cafeteria and absolutely bawling over it. Non-stop bullying since kindergarten till high school.
I was actually glad when we had to stay at home due to coronavirus and my grades improved
drastically during online school. During a lesson a kid was fooling around and ended up getting a CRT TV dropped on his head.
We didn't see him for a few weeks after that. He would come back for a day or two then be sick.
He died of a brain bleed in his sleep. That's the reason he was feeling sick. It would have been picked up quicker, but his family were Jehovah's Witnesses and didn't take him to a hospital, just a GP. Small town. Football is king. One of my friends was sexually assaulted on campus. I was a witness to the exit of her attacker. She waited in a chair while blood pooled beneath her and police questioned her. Wearing sweatpants I gave her because her clothes were ruined. Evidence.
They kept her for over an hour questioning her before I got a call out to her parents. A hospital trip later.
She's had to have serious surgery to stop internal bleeding. She was a minor. He was legal of age. QB star of the team.
Open and shut case, right?
Witnesses, evidence, grand jury refused to indict for statutory rape.
She ended up leaving town.
Bullied and her name dragged through the mud. I tried to be there for her, especially since I was the one who found her.
Her face that day has never left my memory.
Nor the blood puddling beneath her seat. This was before cell phones, or I'd have called her family sooner. I testified for her, and while I know I did everything I could at that age, 13, I still wished I could have done more.